What's going on? Welcome back to the GOAT Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Neander. Everybody, let's do it. Today, what do we got going on here? We're going to finish up our AFC Divisional Preview Series. So we've already gone through the West, the East, and the North. So that leaves today, we're going to do the AFC South. So we've got another friend of the show coming on to help us out today. Good friend of mine, Gage Scott. He's been in a couple of leagues with me over the last couple of years, and he really hasn't been playing fantasy football that long, but man, does he really get it. He's a really good owner, and I really wanted to have him on for a fresh perspective, maybe someone that doesn't have that same jaded opinion of some of these guys that I know I have, and probably some of you guys have. I'm a very grudge-holding kind of a fantasy football owner, so it'll be a lot of fun. Thanks a lot, Gage, and without further ado, here we go with the AFC South. All right, everybody, we're joined here by Gage Scott, as I mentioned. Thank you, Gage, for joining the show. How you doing today?
Doing great, man. How you doing, Jim?
Doing pretty well. Thanks for joining us. So for those of you out there, Gage is one of the newer league mates for me. We've been in the same league for a couple of years now. And when I first joined that league, I was hoping I was joining an easy money league. I didn't know you or anybody else in that league. And for no other reason, it's not been easy money because of you. Gage is an excellent fantasy football owner in the short time he's been into it. And really wanted to have you on the show because I was interested. I know you haven't been playing fantasy football for all that long. And in a couple of years, every time I talk to you about it, you seem very knowledgeable about it and really seem to get the nuances and kind of the little things around, fantasy football. So I thought it'd be great to have you on for an episode. And, we're going to get right to it with the AFC South here. You ready to rock?
Absolutely. Appreciate being on, Jim.
All right, man, let's do it. So we're going to start with the division-leading Houston Texans from last year. They've been, pretty well talked about in the offseason because of a lot of moves that they've made, questionable ones at the very best. Bill O'Brien's been taking some heat over these moves. I'm definitely in that corner. I'm not sure about you, but I think they were questionable at best. So they went ahead and traded DeAndre Hopkins, their stud wide receiver, to Arizona. They got David Johnson in return. They also went ahead and grabbed Brandon Cooks from the LA Rams, Randall Cobb out of free agency from Dallas. They're hoping that all those targets that Hopkins left behind are going to be filled in by Cooks and Cobb. I'm not sure for fantasy owners if that's going to be an okay trade-off, but we're going to see here. We're going to start with Deshaun Watson, the number 5 quarterback last year. He's been a top-flight quarterback basically every year he's been in the league and been one of the most consistent, reliable fantasy options for people looking for quarterbacks. Now, the big question is, without DeAndre Hopkins, does he take a hit, and how far does he take a hit? I still have him as a QB1, but in the back half of that, more around QB7 or QB8. What are you thinking about for Deshaun Watson this year?
Right. Even if he takes a hit for DeAndre Hopkins being gone, Watson's always found a way to make it through. His talent is just going to overcome that, even behind a terrible offensive line. Points per game last year, he was second, only behind Lamar Jackson. So even with his rushing floor and his endless weapons, he's going to find a way to make it through. I think probably on the back end of the QB1 conversation. I wouldn't draft him top 5, but he's definitely going to find a way to make it up there for sure.
Yeah, it's hard to deny the talent, like you said. He just seems like that kind of guy. I'm almost excited to see what he can do without Hopkins and just to see how far he can elevate his game and how much he makes everybody else better around him. A lot's going to depend on the health of his receivers, which we're going to get to, of course. So I think we both see Deshaun Watson as a back-end QB1, someone that falls into that 6 to 10 kind of range. And it all depends on how much you value that to where you're going to draft him. He probably won't be on my teams because QBs in that range usually go, in those mid-rounds, 7, 8, 9, and I'm usually out of the QB game by then and waiting for the puntable QBs at the end. But we'll see. I'm excited about Watson. Those 400 yards, everyone talks about Lamar Jackson and other rushing quarterbacks and the injury risk. And I'm always shocked how Deshaun Watson never factors into that conversation. Ran the ball 82 times last year. That's not a minimal amount of attempts for a quarterback to get outside of the pocket. And we all know it just takes one. So I always find it odd that he's kind of exempt from that conversation. I worry about his injury risk, with running the ball that much. But you hear everyone talking about Lamar and the almost inevitability of his injury. Don't really hear it about Watson. So always kind of interesting to me. Let's go to the backfield here. Gone is Carlos Hyde. Lamar Miller's long gone. So now we have the 2 D Johnsons. And make sure, fantasy owners, don't do it. If you draft Duke Johnson in the 4th round because you meant to draft David Johnson, that's on you. I'm giving you fair warning right now. 2 D Johnsons, both on Houston. Don't be that guy. But so David Johnson, he was decent in some games last year. Obviously, Kenyon Drake overtook him, early on in the season when they got him from Arizona and looked fantastic. The question is, with Houston, are we looking at a Lamar Miller situation here where, he's not great, but just because they're willing to stay with the same guy and give him the volume, is there going to be value in David Johnson this year?
I personally don't trust him just yet, just because of his injury history. I know he had a few decent games in Arizona last year, but your ability to be able to call which games are going to be good and which aren't is on you, and that's really up to luck, especially with Duke Johnson out of the backfield catching 44 receptions last year. A lot of that might be taken away from David. They might try to limit him, and because of his injury history, they might try to just have him as a straightforward runner. As a pass catcher, like I said, he'll be splitting it with Duke, so I'm not really sure that I see David Johnson as someone on my upper end radar. If he's still available in the later rounds, then if you want him snag him as an RB2 value, then absolutely. But wouldn't be chasing him.
Yeah, and I'm kind of looking at that too. I'm thinking, 4th round, right around that 4th round, if I've got, a stud running back and then 2 stud wide receivers, and that's where I'm kind of sitting. All of a sudden, these safety picks are looking a lot better to me. These volume picks that, as long as they're healthy, the work's going to be there. There's really nobody there to split carries with David Johnson right now. He's going to have the bulk of the work. So I always kind of like that, that situation. And I think he's going to be undervalued, although I don't think I want him on my team. So there's that to be said. But I do think just overall the way it's going to shake out, he's going to be undervalued, and, he's going to get you that 12, 11 points a game. And at the end of the year, I do think he'll be an RB2. So, that's where I'm going to look at him. But you're right. The value's got to be there. You got to be happy before you get him in the draft. No way you look at him as an RB1, no matter what your team looks like. You can go 4 receivers in a row. You're still not going to want him as your RB1. It's just not going to feel good, So, yeah. And then Duke Johnson, you're right. So, another 62 receptions or another 62 targets last year with 44 receptions. That's, not minimal at all. Even for an RB1, that's a decent amount of targets and receptions. For a guy that's the 3rd down back, the pass catching back, that's quite a lot of usage. So, I can look at it both ways. I think if they are really impressed with David Johnson's pass catching ability once he gets on the field, and maybe half of those Duke Johnson targets go there, all of a sudden then you have big value on this guy. So it can work out that way, but you're not going to be able to wait and see. He's going to be drafted, so whoever has him is going to be that guy that has to wait and see, right?
Too late by then.
yeah, too late by then. So but let's go to the receivers. This is really where the value has been, or not value, but where the impact has been, for Houston players these last few years. Most of that led by DeAndre Hopkins. So he's letting go of 150 targets. That is a whole lot of ball to be thrown around. So the big question here is, who are the big beneficiaries, and is anyone going to get enough of those targets to be elevated into a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 conversation? So they bring in Brandon Cooks. He's had issues. He's had some good seasons, but he's been moved around a lot. We know the concussion issues are there. I assume he's going to go into preseason as wide receiver 1 on the depth chart, but that remains to be seen. Assume we'll have Will Fuller as wide receiver 2 on the depth chart, and then I would say Kenny Stills as number 3. Do you feel like that's accurate, or just as far as the depth chart going into the season, not necessarily how you see them playing out?
Right. Yeah, I looked at the depth chart last night, and they do have Cooks listed as wide receiver 1. With the injuries and stuff, man, I see why they put him up there, because he's had 1,000-yard seasons with 3 other teams. So the potential is definitely there. But with concussion history, it could be game 1, it could be game 3. He could last all the way through. I just don't see him breaking another 1,000-yard season with the Texans. No one's ever done it 4 times. So, and for 4 different teams, should I say. And there's just so many different moving weapons around this that who knows who's going to take the bulk of the targets. Fuller might not stay on the field. Cooks might not stay on the field. There's so many injuries. By the end of this, Bill O'Brien could be playing wide receiver. We have no idea.
No, it's a good point, though. We know Fuller has had trouble staying on the field. QT has, almost been not able to stay on the field. He had that little breakout a few years ago and then couldn't stay on the field after that. And that's my main concern when I look at these guys. It's all about, can I draft them as my number 5 or my number 4 on my fantasy team so that I can afford to just wait and see, let them sit and stew. If I need them because of bye weeks or because of injuries, I can look at them. But, there's too many big games or 1 or 2 big games and then flatlining for 3 or 4 games for all these guys. You saw it from Stills, you see it from Fuller. If you Nostradamus it and you nail that week, great. But if you don't, then you don't, and you get hurt. I tend to take the 10 points instead of going for 25 and maybe getting 2. So let's do this now. Not talking about the depth chart before the season starts, but talking about what do you think is the actuality of this receiver core at the end of the year? Are you going to be happy that you drafted any of these guys? And, what order would you rank them in as far as your interest in them going into the season? Let's call it 1 through 4. You got Cooks, you got Fuller, you got Stills, you got QT. Let's call it 1 through 4. Who are you most interested in?
I think as a value pick in later rounds, Kenny Stills could be a pretty interesting pick, especially considering the injuries that could potentially happen. We all know Will Fuller is going to have the upside, but he only averaged 7.7 points a game last year. So if you want to bang your head against the wall when he scores 54 points and he's sitting on your bench, then by all means, go for it. But Stills and Cobb are interesting. Cobb coming in, like you mentioned earlier, would have been the wide receiver 1 for Houston last year, based on his stats last year. So Stills and Cobb are definitely at the top for me. I would still put Fuller as 3 just because we know his potential. But even Cooks last year had the games he did play was not that great. So I'd put him towards the bottom too. QT is interesting. I would still put him more towards the bottom. He showed a couple flashes last year too in a couple games where he blew up, but I don't see him in this array of tornado of receivers being more than worth drafting.
Yeah, I mean, these guys, I think they're all stuck in that streamer, kind of situation. But unfortunately, Cooks, Fuller are both going to be drafted and they're going to be rostered. So you're not going to have a chance until someone drops them.
Right.
And Stills and QT and Cobb, I'm just not confident enough on those guys. Cobb interests me, but I just got to see how he fits in. I've never felt like Watson was a guy that really heavily targeted the slot position. And we'll see if that changes with an upgrade in talent there. But I'm not expecting it to, so I'm kind of off Houston wide receivers going into the season right now. And we'll see where their ADP kind of shakes out as we get closer to draft time. But for right now, I'm kind of just out.
Yeah, I'm more of a safer bet. And so far, I mean, none of these guys are 1,000 yards right now. It's just not worth it for me. There's much better options out there at the moment.
All right, so let's finish it up with the tight ends here in Houston. We got Jordan Akins and Darren Fells both still on the roster. They both had little sections of the year last year where they kind of came up and stepped up, had a few good games, then kind of fell by the wayside again. I definitely feel like Darren Fells is the number 1 tight end going into this season. I'm hoping that at some point in preseason, that becomes evident and obvious, whether because of coach speak or just because of play or whatever, that he becomes the number 1. They pretty much split targets last year. 55 targets for Akins, 48 for Fells. The big difference here was the nose for the end zone. Akins found it twice, 7 times for Darren Fells. He found pay dirt. Pretty nice, 34 receptions, 7 targets. That's finding the end zone, a lot. And I like a guy that has a nose for the end zone. I know part of it's, opportunity. So if you're getting those high value targets, in the red zone, within the 5-yard line, that's obviously going to increase your chances. But if you're getting those targets, there's a reason. There's a reason you're trusted for those targets. So do you think Darren Fells gets enough of Jordan Akins' targets to be a draftable or a week-to-week playable tight end? Or is it just not enough pie to go around and not a big enough share to really be on your radar?
With the touchdown upside, I still don't even see it just because the addition of all these new weapons. I know he loved the red zone targets, and I know he capitalized on them quite a few times. But he didn't have a single game that was over 100 yards. His receptions were a little bit lower, and I know Akins was cutting into that. But until further notice, man, I just don't see him being a top 10 tight end.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I mean, he's going to be, sneaky to me again. If I hear the coaches saying guaranteed he's the number 1, he's the guy with the top talent, we want to get him more involved. If I start hearing a lot of that verbiage, I'm going to start moving him up pretty quickly. But for now, he's definitely outside my top 12. He's closer to that, 16, 17 range. And I'd like to move him up. I think the talent's there, but we'll have to see what happens.
Right. He has the physical ability, like you said, but we just don't know yet. And it's not worth taking a dart throw,
I hear you. I hear you. All right, that's going to bring us moving along to the number 2 team last year, but one of the more surprising teams in the NFL, the Tennessee Titans, made a nice deep playoff run. Really came alive, the second half of the season when they put Ryan Tannehill into that starting position. Finally dumped Mariota through the season and actually got rid of him, in the offseason. So a lot of questions here. They didn't really make a lot of additions through free agency, almost none at all as far as skill players or fantasy players go. Very little in the draft. They did draft Darrington Evans in the 3rd round at Appalachian State. It definitely makes sense. He's kind of in that same mold of a Dion Lewis who they let go. Smaller back, good at pass catching, but probably not big enough or really the skill set to be in every down, kind of a back or rushing, kind of a back. But they did get him to replace Dion Lewis. And then that's it. I mean, this team, I love the cameo. I got to know, all right, what's the name? What's the cat's name?
His name's Misha. He wanted to join the conversation too.
Yeah, hey, mine. I actually heard mine just before outside the door. I didn't let her in, and she now wants to be on the show. She's definitely. I hear her outside calling me with her meows. So thanks for joining us, Misha. We appreciate it.
What do you think about Tennessee, buddy?
So Ryan Tannehill, once he took over in week 7 through week 17 was the QB3. Extremely impressive. Now, that's not just saying he was a very good quarterback for Tennessee, which he was, leading them, to the playoffs and beyond. But that's a fantastic fantasy quarterback. Anytime you're number 3, when you're not expected to be anywhere near that, that's a fantastic showing. Couple of games there where, he kind of disappeared as far as the amount of attempts and the volume go, but he was still very efficient in those games. So when you look at his efficiency numbers for him and as a team, red zone conversions and touchdowns, just 3rd down conversions. I mean, really extraordinary numbers that I wouldn't bet on being repeated. So, you like a lot about what you saw at Tannehill last year. There's a wide swath of opinion on Ryan Tannehill to where he should be, valued for this year. What do you think?
I ran with Tannehill last year all the way up into the playoffs, but I'm a sucker for safe quarterbacks with a little bit more of an upside. I kind of saw him as like a Josh Allen 2.0, a little bit better than that. He's got the rushing in there. He's got 4 rushing touchdowns last year, along with his 22 passing touchdowns. I like the ratio of touchdowns to interceptions too. Only 6 interceptions. He was definitely efficient, but we know that Derrick Henry is obviously the centerpiece, and I'm not sure if that's going to continue, which I wouldn't see why it wouldn't. The volume, I don't see increasing, like I'm saying. And to replicate this kind of season this year again, like last year, it's not. The chances aren't that great. But I still like Tannehill up at the top. I would still put him in top 10 this year, just because the efficiency of Tennessee.
So yeah, that's the money question: is he QB1, right? Because most teams are going to draft just one QB. Some will draft a backup, but you're going to put your money on one. You got to hope you're picking someone that's in that QB1 range. I personally have him outside, and the big reason for me is just the number of attempts. When I was talking about it before, if I was questioning what I think the perfect game looks like, if I'm Mike Vrabel and I'm Tennessee's head coach, and I go into the locker room, I'm like, you know what? That is the exact game I want to play. To me, that's like 21-7, where they run the ball 35 times and throw the ball 22 times, and just beat the snot out of the other team and really demoralize them. To me, that's the game they want to play. And I think if they execute their game plan well, you're going to see a lot of those 20 to 25 attempt games from Tannehill. And if he's not as efficient as he was, then it's just not going to be there. That 180 yards only works if there's 2 TDs, 2 or 3. If they're not there, you just don't get it. So I'm concerned, very, very concerned. You won't see Tannehill probably on any of my teams to start the year. That being said, if he's out there, and I'm looking at the stream, I think he will absolutely be one of those guys that every week, is talked about, on Wednesday or Tuesday as, that streamable guy, or do you pick him up this week to play, things like that. So we'll see. And the big reason for that is Derrick Henry. So moving on to the backfield here, Derrick Henry, as you said, obviously the number one piece here, huge portion of the pie. Not only do they run the ball an awful lot, but he gets almost all of it. Over 300 carries last year, which is becoming rarer and rarer to see 300, in a season. 1,500 yards, so he still was able to maintain his yards per carry even through that workload, and 16 touchdowns. And, this is the kind of guy that by the time the second half comes, the defense is, like, all right, stop hitting me, dude. I mean, I'm done with this, right? He just barrels forward and really, turns it on near the end of the game. You start seeing those 10, 12, 15-yard chunks when people are getting tired of trying to take him down, So I think the touchdown number will come down. 16 is a big number to put out there. There's no reason to think he won't be a double-digit guy, but I just think it's going to come down a little bit. And we know the receptions aren't there. They've never been there. They're never going to be there. Even with Dion Lewis leaving, as we mentioned before, they drafted Darrington Evans, kind of in that same mold. You assume he's going to get most of the receiving work. And it's really the correct call, because when you watch Derrick Henry catch the ball, it's very stiff. It's not really fluid, catching the ball, on the run, and I don't see that happening. So he was number 3 last year. What's your ceiling for Derrick Henry, and where are you comfortable drafting him?
Like you said, especially in half-point PPR leagues, the receptions aren't really there. He only had 18 last year. Drafting Darrington Evans from Appalachian State, I mean, he was more of the catcher like Dion Lewis was, 23 touchdowns. You're right. When you watch Derrick Henry catch the ball, he kind of looks a little bit lost because he's used to just pounding it into people. I don't see him leading the league in rushing again. It's very hard to do 2 years in a row. So RB1 status, yes, but maybe on the lower end RB1, kind of the backer end this year, I think. They did draft the offensive tackle of Georgia, Isaiah Thomas, to try to solidify the line a little bit, but I don't think that was ever a problem, and it's really hard to do it twice in a row. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I'm the same way on Henry. I just think I don't like trying to replicate what your absolute ceiling season is, right? So you got to tell me, if I'm drafting Derrick Henry in the top 5, then I'm assuming he's having at least as good of a year, because I know the receptions aren't there. And so you got to have near 300 receptions or 300 carries. You got to have close to 1,500 yards and a bulk load of TDs. Or else I don't see the pathway to being a top 5 running back in this league with all the receptions. So I just don't see it. I'm not going to have Derrick Henry on my team, not because I don't want him, only because I'm not going to draft him where I have to get him. That's just how it is. So let's go to the receivers here. Big story, A.J. Brown going into his second year. Really opened up a lot of eyes last year in his rookie season. The physical just capabilities of this guy. It's not just that he's big or just that he's strong or that he's fast or that he has big hands. He's got all of it. I was really shocked to see some of those highlights when he was just running away from people, and then once they got in his way, just running over them, throwing them to the side, really doing whatever he wanted to. Extraordinarily impressive. He was the number 15 wide receiver last year with only 52 receptions on 84 targets. Right, he turned that into over 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. So obviously does a lot with the ball once he gets it. And it wasn't like all that was air yards. He wasn't just catching the ball 40 yards down the field. He was making a lot of those yards happen. So I see a guy that's set to increase his numbers this year. But when we talked before, I think you felt like A.J. Brown was maybe not going to fall into that wide receiver 1 category for you. So, you have him as a pretty, mid to low wide receiver 2. Talk about A.J. Brown and what you're expecting this season.
Right. He has the size, the physicality, the speed we love to see. He reminds me a lot of Julio Jones in that aspect. And taking 52 targets and going 1,051 yards with it is very impressive. But again, we're talking about how, Derrick Henry is the centerpiece of the offense still. The attempts for Tannehill aren't that high. We still have Corey Davis and a couple others that are taking a little bit of the pie out. So he should, on paper, improve from his rookie season, but I don't think enough so to where I don't think he can replicate 52 catches and get 1,000 yards. That's really hard to do. Could be wrong, but I kind of want to steer away from that one as far as a wide receiver 1. Definitely good value for the 2, though.
Yeah, I mean, the way I'm looking at it is 52 out of 84. And yeah, he did a ton with the 52 catches. You're not probably going to replicate that yards per catch again, but he might. But I see his targets going up by 25 to 30 easily, as now being identified as, the obvious number 1 target in Tennessee. For a team that, may have to change it up a little bit. Teams are going to know they're going to run. They might stack the box a little bit and, make Tannehill prove that he can beat them and not let Derrick Henry beat up on him all game. I just have a hard time seeing a number one wide receiver being under 100 targets. In this league the way it goes right now, even for a lower volume team. So if I'm looking at AJ Brown getting 115 targets and maybe catching 75 of them, I would assume there's still going to be a small uptick in yardage and maybe or maybe not touchdowns. But I'm not looking for him to be a top 6 guy, but probably looking for him to be a 10 to 12 kind of guy. So yeah, I'm going the other way. I've got him in my wide receiver 1. You did mention some of the other guys there. That's Corey Davis. That's Adam Humphries. They did let Tajay Sharp go in the offseason. So for the most part, on a team with low volume, we're looking at at most the number 3 wide receiver. So I think these 3 guys are really the only conversation. And with the rest of them, with Davis and Humphries, the conversation is, are they on your radar? Because for me, these are guys that I would only draft as my last round pick. I still need to fill out my roster. Other than the fact that Corey Davis is in a contract year, there's not much else to make me think that these guys are going to elevate their game to playable status in fantasy football. Am I missing anything here?
Actually, last year I took Corey Davis in a really late round. I can't remember because, obviously AJ Brown was unproven, and I saw him kind of as, at the time, a wide receiver 1. And we know the emergence of AJ Brown kind of cut into that, but he still didn't really do enough for me to really pursue it again, especially coming up on this year with AJ Brown supposed to be climbing up in the ranks. So Davis, again, he disappointed me once. I wouldn't be surprised if he did it again. So
yeah, for me, a lot of it's going to be on where he falls and what my team looks like right then, right? Like you said, I don't know that I would feel great about AJ Brown being my number 1 receiver on my team. It's all about the roster construction. If I go stud running back, in the first round, and then I go, receiver 2nd round, and he's my number 2 wide receiver in the 3rd round, I'm probably going to be doing the happy, happy, joy dance around my draft room. But we'll see if I hit there. And then let's go to tight end here. We know they released their longtime veteran, Delanie Walker. Sad day for Titan Nation. Delanie was a beloved figure on the team, but it was the right call. It's time to go with the injuries. Just, time to move on to the younger. And that means Jonnu Smith. So Jonnu Smith is the man there now. A team that didn't throw, they were probably in the middle of the pack, near the lower end as far as targets at the tight end. But Jonnu Smith had 44 targets. And now there's 31 targets, vacated by Delanie Walker. So the question is, how many of those targets will he get? If he gets all of them, does that put him higher on the radar? Once Tannehill came in, he was the number 12 tight end from week 7 on. So with Tannehill, he was a tight end 1. Is he even on the radar for a tight end 1 right now, or got to prove it?
I'd say a little of both. You got to prove it still, but I like that he did play all 16 games, stayed healthy. And again, with Delanie Walker cutting into him, and might have even more so as far as being on the field longer, because they love Delanie Walker. Obviously, everybody does. He's a warrior. But with him gone, Jonnu Smith has the talent for sure. He still had 439 yards last year, 3 touchdowns. So I think without somebody cutting into that, he could easily be a middle tier for sure. If he lands like at 10 as far as tight ends go, I think that wouldn't shock me. But maybe not beyond that.
And I think what a lot of people, kind of underestimate is how fast those tier breaks happen at tight end. You got 1, 2, maybe 3 and 4, and then you take like 3 flights down the stairs to like 5 through 7, and then you got to go to the basement, to get from like 8 on. And you're talking about like minimal differences sometimes, and at the end of the season, it can look a little bit bigger, but it's really not when you break down, the game by game, numbers. So, Jonnu Smith being anywhere from tight end 8 to tight end 37, completely on the radar for me, I wouldn't be surprised any of those outcomes. I'd be surprised if it's a top 6. But outside of that, I could see him being a tight end 1 for sure. So, all right, man, let's keep it rolling. Another interesting team here, the Indianapolis Colts. Another team with a good amount of new faces, right? So the big story here, Phillip Rivers taking over as the quarterback. Obviously, Jacoby Brissett's days are eventually numbered as a starter anyway in Indianapolis. If he wants to start, he'll probably have to move along. So they bring in Phillip Rivers to take over for probably the next 2 years or so. They draft Jacob Eason to hopefully be maybe the quarterback of the future. They'll see what they have in him. They let Eric Ebron go. A number of these kind of middling, underachieving wide receivers, Devin Funchess, Dontrell Inman, Chester Rogers. A lot of these guys are gone. So let's talk about the new faces that we brought in here. Brought in an extremely underachieving Trey Burton, at tight end, I guess, to replace Eric Ebron. And then through the draft, this is where they really kind of, went strong. Wide receiver Michael Pittman Jr. out of USC with a second pick in the second round. And then just a handful of picks later, Jonathan Taylor, the very talented running back out of Wisconsin, the 9th pick in the second round. And a lot of people had Taylor as a top 3, running back prospect going into the draft. So really, this was a great job done by this team. They didn't have that many needs. Their offensive line is one of the best in the league. A solid defense. They needed some pieces where they got, they did pick up some pieces. Got DeForest Buckner in the offseason, but don't want to get into defense too much here. So the question is, what's the Rivers breakdown going to look like, right? Rivers last year still had the yards, 4,600 yards, so still, throwing the ball around a lot. Only turned that into 23 touchdowns. You figure with that many yards, you're bound for a little positive regression maybe with touchdowns. The question here is the 20 interceptions. Now, is that just due to poor offensive line play, poor decision making, maybe less zip on the ball as he gets a little bit older, a combination of all those things? I'm not sure. What I do know is I would rather stand behind the Indianapolis Colts offensive line and throw the football than stand behind the Chargers line and throw the football. So do you think that's going to make a big difference this year just for Phillip Rivers himself?
It'll make a difference. I don't see it being huge, exponentially different. I know in Los Angeles, Rivers like to dump it off to his halfbacks, and he does have a lot of that here too as well. I mean, you have Nyheim Hines in the back. You have new Jonathan Taylor. You even have Jordan Wilkins back there. So there's a lot of options in the back to make him feel comfortable. You have a solid tight end in Jack Doyle. He's going to miss Hunter Henry. But, Mike Williams didn't really catch anything for him either. So he's not really used to having, aside from Keenan Allen, elite targets. And he might not see a whole lot of that here either. I feel like the structure is a little bit better because of the offensive line. He might have a little bit more time, and maybe he'll get more comfortable back there. Maybe the interception number will drop down. So at 15.97 points per game last year, I don't see him going up too much, maybe a little bit of improvement, but I still don't see him creeping up into the top 10.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm looking at him as a QB1, but I think he's going to be criminally underrated in the streaming market and in the back end of the draft / 2 quarterback league markets. I just think that when you look at he was still productive, 4,600 yards. If you make maybe 4 of those interceptions turn to touchdowns, he's a QB1, right? 4 more touchdowns, 4 less interceptions, he might slide right up there into number 12. And I think with a smarter team, one of the best head coaches in the league, I think, in Frank Reich with this great line, I just think the opportunity is there. Am I drafting Phillip Rivers? No, I don't want to give you that impression that I'm out there targeting Phillip Rivers. I'm just keeping an eye on it. And if he has a great preseason and really hooks up with these wide receivers well, it'll be on my radar for end of the draft, kind of assurance for QB, trade bait, what have you. Let's move into the backfield here because you mentioned Jonathan Taylor. We talked about him coming in the draft, and we talked about Phillip Rivers' propensity for dumping off to the backfield. The amount of times he dumped the ball off in L.A. not only was always high, but has only gotten more incredible throughout the last few years. I think last year was close to 200 running back targets between Austin Eckler and Melvin Gordon, a little bit to Justin Jackson there. That's an extraordinarily high number, and I think that adds value to every single Indianapolis running back. For me, the biggest winner of the offseason before the draft was Marlon Mack, getting Phillip Rivers and now having the opportunity to gain 50 or 60 plus targets. That's a monstrous number to go from one year to the next year to add value to a guy that already had, over 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. Now you add, 40 more receptions, 300 something yards and maybe 4 or 5 touchdowns. It's a lot of freaking fantasy points,
Yeah.
So I love Marlon Mack. Now enter Jonathan Taylor, and boom, my big Mack balloon has been deflated and is now laying on the floor because I don't even know that he's going to be the number 1 running back at this point. Jonathan Taylor very well could show that he is a good enough 3-down back that he takes over. Marlon Mack is going to be a free agent after this year. So, any work he gets is just another more payday he gets from somebody else. I don't know. I see incentive for them to use Mack. I see incentive for them to move right to Jonathan Taylor. Either way, they both plummet down my rankings because of the other one. Where do you see Marlon Mack this year? Is he their running back one? And where do you see him overall in the fantasy landscape?
I think he starts as their RB1 with Jonathan Taylor kind of creeping in. But again, it's just there's so many moving parts back there. You have Nyheim Hines, you have Jordan Wilkins, and who knows who's going to be throwing to who. Marlon Mack only had 14 receptions last year. So in PPR leagues, that's a little bit concerning. Just over 1,000 yards rushing. But we just mentioned Derrick Henry, who had 1,500 yards rushing and 14 receptions, and we were a little bit down on him too. So he doesn't have 19 people waiting behind him to catch balls. So for me, I mean, Mack back in RB2. If he was there later rounds, I mean, I would take him just to see. But I might try to avoid him this year just because it's so questionable. Even though with Rivers back there, he loves dumping it off. But like I said, I think he has a little bit more time this year to stand in the pocket and see what's going on. So he might necessarily have to immediately take the ball from the snap and turn to his left and just dump it off. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm gonna steer away from this backfield here for a minute.
So, like, in hypothetical draft world, you start your draft, and wherever you are, you draft, stud RB1, you're happy with him no matter who you get. You go 2 wide receivers, you're happy with them, and it comes back around. Now you're looking at, a Marlon Mack as your 4th round draft pick and your second running back. At this moment, is that something that sounds attractive to you, or just the unknown is too much with Jonathan Taylor that you'd have to pass?
I think the unknown would overtake this one, even in the 4th round. Just like I said, I'm not even sure that he will rush for 1,000 yards again this year, so I'm not sure on that one. But,
yeah, it looks like you can wait. I'm looking right now at ADPs, and it's still very early in the ADP season, so there's going to be, wild variation, for different sites for ADP. But it looks like he's going in the first half of the 5th round. And I think that's very, very appropriate, honestly, when I'm looking at, drafts. We just brought up the 4th round, because I think that's where you might be reaching. But if you like him, then it's good value, right? And the 4th round is, for me, that make or break point for Mack, where, if you're a believer and you think, he's going to beat out Taylor, he's going to get the bulk of the work, 4th round is going to be a good pick for you with Mack. But if you're too worried about it, then that's the round where you got to decide. I'm out, because if I don't pick him now, I may not get him. So, right. That's that with him. All right, let's move on to the wide receivers here. We got T.Y. Hilton as the, expected number 1 on this squad, of course. The bigger question here is who's going to be the number 2 wide receiver. Now, that's between Zach Pascal, who was already there last year, obviously, 72 targets. So you have to assume he's the front runner for the number 2 job. You have Paris Campbell, second-year receiver, I think out of Ohio State. He was a second-rounder a year ago and had a couple of big games, but just couldn't stay on the field. Had a couple big games, got hurt, missed a few games, came back, had a couple of big games, broke his foot, missed the rest of the year. And then you have Michael Pittman Jr. coming in from USC. Lately we've been seeing rookies come in and having that big impact with the right situation, not always, but the right situation. So it's definitely possible here. Do you have Hilton as number 1? And if yes, where do you like him? Part B of that question, after Hilton, rank number 2, 3, and 4 for those 3 guys, Michael Pittman Jr., Zach Pascal, and Paris Campbell.
Okay, so we have T.Y. as number 1. Obviously, if he can stay healthy on the field, I mean, we've seen what he can do. Even though he only had 8 points a game last year through 10 games, a little concerning. But, I mean, they love T.Y. in Indianapolis. And like I said, we've seen what he can do before. Michael Pittman's interesting because, I mean, I think maybe a new face, a new spark in there. I mean, it might turn into an A.J. Brown or DJ Chark situation. Like, it might be an awesome rookie year. So I think I really like him to be a new face in there. Pascal stepped in averagely last year. I mean, he still had 600 yards he played all the games, but he had 5 touchdowns as well. So I'd probably put him next with Paris Campbell right under that. I said we saw the potential of Paris Campbell in his explosive games, but until we see the consistency of that, I just don't see him being at the top. So.
Yeah, I think Pascal's going to fall this year. I think it's going to be Hilton number 1, Campbell at 2, then the rookie Pittman at 3, and I think Pascal's going to fall all the way to 4 by the end of the season. Doesn't mean I necessarily am targeting any of these guys outside of Hilton. I think Campbell might be a late round flyer I take in a couple of leagues if he falls into that last or next to last pick for me for my skill guys. Just because what I saw of him last year I really liked, but you don't know if that's going to be there with Rivers, right? They got to make that connection also. T.Y. Hilton is one of my more interesting plays for this year. He's going in right around halfway through the fourth round right now. And, when I look at the number one receiver for Phillip Rivers for the last number of years, Keenan Allen, I look at a guy who's been drafted in the, late first to late second basically every year. Now, if you just told me this year, would I take Keenan Allen in the fourth round with Phillip Rivers, of course, I'd say, of course I would. Absolutely I would. And that's how I'm looking at T.Y. Hilton. I'm looking at T.Y. Allen right now and saying, yes, I'm in. I'm expecting T.Y. Hilton, if he can stay on the field, to have, Keenan Allen type numbers and target share. So I'm kind of all in on him. And, I don't know if I'll put my money where my mouth is come draft day, but right now I feel like I'm in, So, yeah. And then we go to tight end. All right, so Eric Ebron is gone. Eric Ebron, they're, kind of the red zone tight end for this team. I felt like Doyle was more of the over the middle between the 20s guy, and then, Ebron was a little bit bigger down near the end of the field. Makes sense with his stature, compared to Doyle. Ebron's gone now. They brought in Trey Burton. So, Burton was awful in Chicago, got paid big money, didn't really do anything. Jack Doyle was number 17 tight end last year. We know that Phillip Rivers in his career has had huge tight ends, right? I mean, Gates, for how long was Gates great for? And then Henry's had some great seasons. So, we know that Phillip Rivers, just like we know he likes to throw to running backs, we know he likes to throw to his tight ends. That is proven, right? 15 years in the bank of throwing to the tight end, and I don't see that changing right now. So while I don't love Jack Doyle or his talent, I am falling in love with the opportunity right now for Jack Doyle, which scares me. So it makes me feel like I'm going to make a bad move I don't want to make, Do you have some optimism for Jack Doyle this year? What do you think?
I do, actually. I mean, last year was always the Ebron-Doyle battle. And I was like, man, if one of them was gone, the other one has some real potential. And one of them's gone. And then when you bring in Phillip Rivers, I wish they wouldn't have brought in Trey Burton because that just kind of throws in a weird dynamic to it. But I have a lot of optimism for Doyle, especially when you look at tight ends in this division. I would say there's so many interesting levels of that. But I like Doyle, and I might actually get him, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I think the ultimate Phillip Rivers thing to do would be like all of a sudden like Trey Burton's like tight end 5 at the end of the year, like out of nowhere. Like, he has like 11 touchdowns, like.
Yep, that's gonna happen too. With tight ends, it's so unpredictable, man. Like.
Yeah, it almost feels like with tight ends, once they have that one game where they kind of become trusted and they get that weird 12, 14 target game out of nowhere, and then it kind of rides like that. A little like. That wave kind of rides for tight ends for a while. We saw it with Higbee last year. We've seen it with a bunch of guys where they hit that one game where they have uncharacteristically high targets, and then all of a sudden they're a big part of the game plan, for a number of weeks going forward. So we can see it. All right, man, that's going to do it. Brings us, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Always fun talking about the Jags. I don't know, man. The Jaguars. Foles was a bad move to bring in anyway. I didn't like giving him all that money to begin with. I thought that was just, an egregious overreach and overspending, and now they have to eat it. And I'm not upset about it at all, for them. I thought that was an awful move. So they're going forward with Gardner Minshew. We saw a decent amount of Gardner last year. He started 12 games and played in parts of another couple of games. So we got to see a decent amount of Gardner Minshew. As far as the additions they made to the team, they didn't really let any of their skilled players go. So, for him, the good thing is they really kind of focused on making additions to that side of the team. That was Tyler Eifert in the tight end position, which was a big need for them. Chris Thompson, a pass-catching running back, from Washington, which makes total sense when you know that Jay Gruden is now their offensive coordinator. So you make the Gruden and Chris Thompson connection. It makes all the sense in the world. And especially when you saw a back like Fournette get all those targets, and he's just not that good of a pass-catching back. So you have that. So they add those two guys from free agency. Then they go in the draft, and they add Laviska Shenault Jr. out of Colorado in the second round. A lot of people think he, while he might not be the most polished, route runner or receiver coming out of college, that he might turn into one of the top guys in this draft, if not the top guy in 3 or 4 years. So it might not be a big help this year, but you might see some big plays out of Shenault Jr. And while it doesn't make him draftable, it only helps Minshew's, prospects throughout the year. So you still have Fournette, you still have DJ Chark, Chris Conley, Dede Westbrook, Keelan Cole. Basically, the whole band's back together. I mean, they just went ahead and got back together. Let's see if this group can get better together. and I like that for the most part. So to Gardner Minshew, look, just over 60% completion percentage last year, 3,200 yards, 21 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. 345 yards on the ground, so not an inconsequential amount of yards, but not not the difference maker by any means. But he added some points in there. Just before we talk about the rest of the guys, Gardner Minshew, you think he takes a step forward this year, or you think he's going to struggle pretty mightily this year?
I think he takes a little bit of a step forward. I know earlier, I think I might have been a little bit higher on him than you were. 16.8 points a game, a little bit better than Phillip Rivers. I like the yardage total. I mean, it's not fantastic, but when you look at 21 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, I like that ratio as well. And there might be a little minuscule rushing floor there. Maybe that progresses a little bit more. But I think he can progress a little bit. I mean, I wouldn't drop him inside the top 10 for sure, but I mean, I think he'd be right on the cusp there as well. There's a lot of quarterbacks in this division that might be right on the cusp.
Yeah. Well, it's always weird because they play each other twice a year, and then when you watch them play each other, I always feel like those are the uglier games. Even those games are ugly, and that makes me want them even less because they play each other twice. And I'm like, crap, I gotta watch my guy play these dog crap games like 6 times a year.
Yeah. The Colts and the Titans have the first and second easiest schedule in the whole league because they have to play each other. They're playing that division. I mean, that was pretty interesting too.
Yeah, I'm all up on Minshew this year. I saw a quarterback that looked a little bit out of his skill level, I thought, at the end of last year, which was surprising. I thought he came in, and this does happen sometimes. A guy comes in, catches lightning in a bottle for whatever reason, and then once defenses catch up a little bit, they start to regress a little bit. And I thought I saw that with Minshew near the end of last year, and I was really, really worried about statting out his skill play. Because I like a lot of his guys. Just don't love him as the leader of them and what I'm going to get out of them. So I'm going to be off on Minshew. Doesn't sound like you're bullish on Minshew by any means, but maybe just a little bit higher than I am. Go to the backfield here. So Leonard Fournette, number 9 running back in 15 games. Listen, he had an excellent season. I'm not going to take anything away from the fact that he was healthy, he was on the field, he was doing his job. But those are all the best things I can say about him. And those aren't shining compliments, right? I mean, thank you for showing up and doing your job. I appreciate it. But 265 carries, 1,150 yards, 4.3 yards per carry clip. Not gross, but definitely nothing that's going to make you thrilled or looking forward to the prospects. And then he only had 3 touchdowns and 265 carries. So you're concerned about that. Now, let's look at the really big anomaly in Fournette's season was the receptions, right? Never before had he been anywhere close to these numbers. 76 receptions, 100 targets, over 500 yards, still couldn't find the end zone. So this guy touched the ball 340 times, found the end zone 3 times. Listen, I don't know if my wife can hear from the other room. I scored more last year, okay?
Damn.
Yeah. No, but I mean, so I'm worried about Fournette that his ceiling has already been reached. This to me, even if he increases the touchdowns, which you assume he will, right? He touches the ball that much and doesn't score. Let's say he scores 4 more touchdowns, which is totally possible. But if he loses, 35, 40 receptions, 300 yards, for me, it doesn't make up. The numbers aren't even close. And I look at Chris Thompson. I know he's a favorite of Jay Gruden. I know Jay Gruden's a favorite of Chris Thompson. And if he's healthy, which is a big if, granted, if he's healthy, I think Chris Thompson's going to be 60, 70 plus targets. And that all comes from Fournette. And he's going to get some carries because he's there. Raquel Armstead is still there. So I think we just saw the best you'll ever get out of Leonard Fournette, and that was number 9.
Oh, yeah. I was lucky enough last year to have Christian McCaffrey and Leonard Fournette as my RB1 and 2. So, yeah, not taking away from what he did last year. But, yeah, Chris Thompson coming in, 100 targets. And it's really hard to take 76 receptions and only get 520 yards out of it and no touchdowns. Like, you got to be a pretty terrible pass catcher out of the backfield for that. We've known his yards per carry through the years. I think last year might have been his best, actually. They used to be in the 3s, which is terrible. So I think you're right. It might have been the best season we've seen from him, and I don't think it's going to happen again. So.
No, and we already know they didn't pick up his 5th-year option, so I don't see them offering him any kind of, contract he's going to be happy with after this season. So I wouldn't even be surprised if there's some drama either before the season or during the season with Fournette and something happens there. So
I think there was already talks of rumors of him being traded earlier. I think I read something about that. So whether it's true or not, I mean, if that's all around in the air, then he might do a little diva dance and try to get his way out of there, you know. So
yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
So yeah, I'm one of those guys that once the rumors are out there, the writing's on the wall, right? You start hearing the bell toll, and no matter what people say after that, it's more about managing the situation than about the fact they want to get rid of him. Right now, I believe the Jacksonville Jaguars want out of the Leonard Fournette business. And you're right, the rumors were there, and then I think 2 days ago, the GM came out and said, hey, well, nothing really materialized with that. So, hey, we're going full steam ahead with Leonard Fournette. And that sounds all good and well, and he could get traded 24 hours from now. You know what I mean? Like, easily. So I think they're still shopping him. It's about what they can get. I think what might happen is the first week comes and goes, the second week comes and goes, and once there's the first big injury to a running back for a team that's a competitor for a playoff or a Super Bowl, they're going to go out and get Fournette, right? One of these better teams that loses their running back, and they're going to be right there looking for him. They're going to pay what they need to get him because the window's small. When you're a winning team, you got to take advantage, right? So there's that. So Fournette for me falls into a back end RB2. Doesn't fall that far, but a little lower than most people have him. I probably have him in the 18 to 20 range, and I think a lot of people have him in that 14, 12 to 14 range. So, do you think he falls far outside running back one, or he's still right on that edge for running back one?
It definitely falls back from running back one for sure. Probably have him around the same as you are, back end of the two, just because there's no way to know what's going to happen between now and then. I mean, regardless of whether he gets traded or not, which is, again, could potentially plummet his whole value. But like I said, there's no way he's going to replicate these numbers next year. Like, there's not a chance. So.
Yeah, we've already seen the stealing. I like to draft guys who I feel like they can, very, very possibly way outperform where I drafted them. And where you're getting Fournette, I mean, there's zero chance he's going to way outperform where you got to pay to get him. So I'm out. All right. Let's get these receivers in. DJ Chark led the way last year. Played 15 games, was the number 16 receiver. Caught 73 balls, was targeted 118 times. Just over 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. So obviously a big breakout for DJ Chark, right? I think it was his first year. I'm not even sure. Might have been his rookie season. And, had a great season. Seems to have solidified himself as the number one target in Jacksonville. Assuming that's the case, what value do you have for DJ Chark? Is he a wide receiver 2? Some people have him creeping up into that very, very back end of wide receiver 1. What are you thinking?
I really like DJ Chark. The only thing that would hinder me from putting him in creeping up towards the wide receiver 1 era is D.D. Westbrook and Chris Conley aren't chumps. I mean, they had 66 receptions and 47 receptions respectively, 660 yards and 75 with 8 touchdowns combined. So I don't think they're going down either. So I don't see Chark taking a huge jump. I think he'll improve from his rookie year a little bit, but I'm not in on creeping up towards a wide receiver 1 at all. If he's there as a wide receiver 2 value, absolutely, because I do like him, and he has the upside there. But as of right now, I think it's a solid receiving core where you have people taking more stuff from him than, say, a wide receiver 2 normally would on another team. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel almost exactly the same way. You could have taken the words out of my mouth. I do like Chark. I just think we've seen, what's going to be near the ceiling for his production in this offense and for what they do and how bad they're going to be. I still think they're going to be a bad team. This is a 4 or 5 win team in my estimation. And when I look at it that way, sure, I like to think they're going to be throwing the ball a lot at the end of the game. Garbage time. We all love that stuff. And you might get a chunk of that with Jacksonville. This might be that team. But at the end of the day, I still want good players on good teams. And as much as I like DJ Chark, I don't think I'm going to be paying what people are paying for him right now. Mm-hmm. I think I want DJ Chark as my number 2 receiver. That's if he's my 4th or 5th pick, right? If I went heavy running backs, like really heavy, and then he's like my number 2 receiver, but my 5th pick, I'm feeling pretty good about it. But he's definitely going before that right now. You're not getting DJ Chark in the 5th round, I don't think. Let me try to find him here. No, you're getting DJ Chark in the early 4th round right now, it looks like, which I think is going to creep even up a little further than that. That's number 17 right now. And I wouldn't be surprised if he goes, up into the 15-14 range.
Mm.
So, I don't know. I'm not in. What I'm definitely not in on is Chris Conley or D.D. Westbrook. I just think, because as you mentioned, the split was so in the middle there that I just think that neither one of them is going to pull enough away from the other to have that worth. And then you add Laviska Shenault Jr. in there, and I just think that I think Chark has his piece of the pie almost kind of set, and then everyone else is going to be splitting the rest of that piece. And the pie in Jacksonville is not good enough for 4 people to eat. It's just
pie.
yeah, no, exactly. Again, between the two of them, I know you like Conley a little bit better. I think Conley has a better nose for the end zone and for making big plays. I think Westbrook, his upside is the higher target share, maybe out of the slot position, more of a possession receiver. And I think with DJ Chark on the outside, I do think that you can make an argument for either one of these guys, and I think it's splitting hairs. If I had to pick, I probably have Westbrook as the number 2 here. All right, we're going to finish it up here with the tight ends. Only bring it up because let's talk about the addition of Tyler Eifert against the entirety of the tight ends of last year for Jacksonville. All right, so Jacksonville last year played James O'Shaughnessy and Seth DeValve and Nick O'Leary and Jeffrey Swaim and Josh Oliver and I think Brett Koyak as well, and combined they caught 52 passes for 77 and out of 77 targets. Now Tyler Eifert played all 16 games. I want to make that very clear because the big issue has always been the injury. And I've been hit by the Eifert injury bug a couple times in my fantasy career, so I know all about it. But you do have to say that he played all 16 games last year, so hopefully that part of his career is done, and he can stay on the field. He caught 43 passes out of 63 targets, 436 yards, and 3 touchdowns, essentially almost matching the entirety of the Jacksonville roster.
Right.
Question is, let's say every single one of those 77 targets go to Tyler Eifert. Is he still worth drafting at that point?
Maybe at the latter end. I mean, I like Tyler Eifert. I think it's a really interesting fit here just because there was 0 production at tight end last year, like you said. And maybe that was a talent issue. So the target share might go up a little bit for tight ends just because they're not used to having someone that's a proven veteran at that spot. And yes, we've seen some pretty gruesome injuries to Tyler Eifert. But if he can stay healthy, I kind of like him. I'm not going to lie. I would consider drafting him towards the latter end. But
yeah, I think this last year or two, and not even so much drafting, because here's the truth of the matter. I just think that if you like Eifert, he's going to be one of those guys you just don't have to draft. He'll be there. I think, week 1, he's going to be sitting there on the free agent wire. And, if he has a big week, he might disappear, but, he'll be there. I like it just because I think the touchdown capability is there for him with that team. Like you mentioned, I liked Minshew's touchdown total, and especially his touchdown to interception ratio. Thought he took good care of the ball, and I thought he had a nose for getting the ball in the end zone. He struggled a lot between the 20s, but I really thought that once he got kind of within the 30, he was really effective at finding the end zone and making those plays. And I think Tyler Eifert could be a big part of that. As I said, not drafting him at all, but I'm a guy that punts tight end regularly. So a lot of times I will draft 2 only because it might be my last 2 picks, in the draft. So I might get more than one just to hedge my bets a little bit or have a little trade bait or something. But I like Eifert in this offense. I think it's going to be interesting to see what he does. And I'm in his corner in that sense. Like you said, he's had those bad injuries, and it's a guy I want to succeed. So, hopefully I'm not letting that play too much into my projections. But, I want him to have a good year, and I think he could be a good fit in that offense. So, pretty good stuff, man. That does it for us, man. That's it. That's every team in the AFC South. Again, one of the dirtier divisions to go through for fantasy football. But you got to mind these teams, right? I did the AFC East the other day with my buddy, and we were saying the AFC East has very few number ones, right? There's very few people that are QB1, RB1, wide receiver 1, any of that stuff. A lot of important players though that you need. Your team can only have one number 1 running back or one number 1 wide receiver. And if anybody else in your league is any good, you should only have 1, right? Hopefully you don't have many more than 1 in the top 10 of the position. If you do, you probably already got it sewn up. So this is another interesting division that, while it may not have that superstar power that we look for, you're going to need to use this division to win your championship. So hopefully we were able to help you out. Really appreciate your time, Gage. Hopefully we get you back in here soon to do another show with us.
Absolutely, man. Blast, man. It was fun.
Thanks, man. Well, listen, take care of yourself. Hopefully we get out to the golf course soon, and I'll look forward to chatting with you soon, man.
Absolutely, man.
All right, take it easy, buddy. All right, thanks again to Gage Scott for helping us out with our AFC South preview. Well, that's going to do it for the AFC Divisional Preview Series, y'all. That's all 4 divisions. They're all up on YouTube. Make sure you go ahead and watch, like, view, share, subscribe to all our videos and our channel, please. We appreciate your ongoing support. We're here to help you get better at fantasy football. Hopefully turn those non-playoff teams to playoff teams and those barely playoff teams into championship teams. We're here to help you take home the trophy. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you soon with the NFC Divisional Preview shows. Look out for them. All right, talk to you soon. Take it easy.